Now, the Winter Olympics have commenced in Beijing, taking place from the 4th until the 20th of February, with about 3,000 athletes competing in 109 different events.
The Games are, of course, surrounded by controversy, with countries including the United Kingdom, the United States and Canada all declaring a diplomatic boycott due to China's human rights abuses.
Ian Duncan-Smith, who represents the Interparliamentary Alliance on China, said the Chinese government commits industrial-scale human rights abuses in the Uyghur region and Tibet, and sends near-daily military incursions into Taiwan's airspace. We cannot lend any legitimacy to China's despotic regime. So I suppose the question is the diplomatic boycott the right course of action, and will it actually be in any way effective?
Yeah, well, I think in terms of the coverage back here of the Olympics, it has been very muted. Of course, the opening ceremony was on Friday when Vladimir Putin arrived and was greatly lauded by President Xi. And they then came out with some announcements on Ukraine and Russia. But in terms of the actual games itself, I do feel for our athletes that are out there, this is the pinnacle of their career. And whilst we have never been as close to the Winter Olympics as the Summer Olympics, it's always really good to follow our athletes and see what they're doing. So I do feel for our athletes out there without any diplomatic support. Even Princess Anne didn't travel. And of course, she goes to all of the Olympic events, Diana.
Yeah, I think she did put out a sort of video message to the athletes, didn't she? But not quite the same. Paul, what are your views? Do you think the diplomatic boycott is the right thing?
Well, I just think, look, you can't really give credence to the whole process of selection, which resulted in Beijing being given the Winter Olympics, and the vote took place. And you took part in that process. And then further down the line, when the event itself is about to begin and all the athletes are in place, all of a sudden there's this big diplomatic storm over the Chinese regime and whether or not it was right to give the Olympics to Beijing in the first place. It seems to me that particular horse has bolted. And I do think I agree with Ali. I mean, in terms of the athletes who are there, it's unfortunate because all of the coverage is about political issues. Rather than the events themselves, and I certainly have little time for the Chinese regime. But let's not forget also that this is not a one-off. I mean, we're going to be holding a World Cup later this year in Qatar, and Qatar has got a pretty appalling human rights record in some areas as well. But there isn't enough being made about that. So I think the whole thing is riddled with hypocrisy, to be perfectly blunt, and the timing I just think is absurd.
I think it has been interesting seeing how sort of the athletes and actually some of those covering the Olympics have got on. There was a report this morning about a Dutch reporter who was dragged away by Chinese security whilst he was live on air. He was later allowed to continue his piece to camera. But I think that's quite damaging, doesn't it? And does that not say a lot about China and its kind of approach to censorship?
Yeah, absolutely. But I do want to give a shout out to Team GB athletes and to maybe some of their families who are at home watching it on. I was looking up this morning, and the curling mixed doubles, Jen Dodds and Bruce Murat, they are hopefully moving into the semi-finals. So you don't know, we might get a medal out of Beijing. Wouldn't that be great? I think we got 5 at the last Winter Olympics, and it would be really good if we could build on that. But of course, part of the issue with the Olympics is it's been used as a platform by China. We had Vladimir Putin arriving and of course, been lauded by President Xi. And Taiwan has condemned the timing of China and Russia's no-limit partnership. The government says the Chinese government is bringing shame to the Winter Olympics, which began on Friday.